Hi everyone, NLP Metaprograms, episode 15, chunk size operator or filter. Very important one this week. You're going to see a slightly different angle. This is my office at home. It's holiday time. I think it's probably holiday time in most parts of the world. And so I'm at home this evening, and the light was streaming in from the windows behind. It didn't really work. So we're doing a different angle. This is my good friend Cagliostro. As you can see, he's constructing some visual images there. That's as long as he's right-handed, which of course he is, because he's holding his staff with that hand in a chair that many of my friends lovingly call the devil's chair. So here we are in my office at home. Chunk size operator. And we're flying completely without aids. I've got no flip chart, got nothing, no slides, which I think is an important thing as a speaker and a presenter and a trainer to do every now and again. Can you actually present something to people with no aids whatsoever? No flip chart, no slides, no nothing, just you. So let me know what you think. Let me see. Did I succeed? I'd love your feedback on that. So the chunk size operator, again, what we've got with Metaprograms is we've got an elicitation question. The language in the question is really important. So the question that we ask somebody is this: if we were to do a project together, would you want the big picture or would you want the detail first? Really important you put in the word first. Do you want the big picture? Would you want the big picture or would you want the detail first? See which one of those two they pick. Then there's a second question to the elicitation, which is this. If they say, I'd want the big picture, then you say, okay, and then would you really need the detail? Okay. If they say they want the detail first, then you ask them, and then would you really need the big picture? Important with that question. Then what we've got is we've got four possibilities. Global. Just the big picture. I want the big picture first. Great. Would you really need the detail? No, absolutely not. Detail. Specific. Would you need the big picture first or the detail first? Detail. Then would you need the big picture? Absolutely not. Yeah, so there's a very black and white, two options. Global, specific. Then we have two other options, which are the person says, I want the big picture first, then would you really need the detail? They go, yes, I would. That's somebody who goes from global to specific. Somebody says, yeah, I want the detail first. Right, and then would you really need the big picture? Yes, I would. Then that's somebody who goes from specific to global. Those are the four choices that we've got. Now let's talk about, what that means from the way that it might influence them, the way that we present to them, the way that they might behave. Somebody who just wants the big picture, then we need to give them big picture, abstract, broad concepts. If we are naturally more detailed and we come across and we communicate with them as we naturally do in the nitty-gritty detail, then they're going to find this quite boring and it's not going to work. If they go, yeah, I want the detail, and we're naturally ourselves very global and abstract, they're going to think we're very fluffy, very woolly, a bit kind of like vague, and that we don't really know what we're talking about. So again, what we've got here with the Metaprograms is, how do we communicate in a way with this person in the way that they communicate with themselves? That's the most important thing. So once we understand Metaprograms, we understand how to elicit Metaprograms, then we can become very chameleon-like and communicate with the person in the way that they communicate with themselves, which will always be the most effective way. Now, if you've got somebody who is global to specific, which is the most common metaprogram for this particular filter, global to specific, then we go from big picture, abstract, broad brushstrokes, and we chunk down into the detail. There's a reason why this is the most common metaprogram. It's the way that we're taught at school, which installs that particular metaprogram. You know, good afternoon, class. Today we're going to talk about arable farming in northern Spain. And you go, "Oh, that's exciting," because I didn't know anything about arable farming in northern Spain. And then the teacher chunks down into the detail of the arable farming in northern Spain. That is called deductive thinking, where we go from the big picture into the detail. That's the way, as a speaker, presenter, trainer, you would actually structure the majority of your material, the majority of your presentations, majority of speeches, because the vast majority of the people in your audience are going to think that way, global to specific. Yeah, put a framework around it, then chunk down into the detail. Now, you will find there's some people that go, "Give me the detail, and then I want the big picture." That is that's a rarer metaprogram, to be honest. I would say, in my experience, 10%, maybe less, because it's not the way that we are programmed to think in school in most ways. That's inductive thinking. That's where we start out with a specific idea, and then using the hierarchy of ideas as a model, we chunk outwards to the big picture. Now, some people, when they've got the details, they can work out their own big picture, so you don't need to tell them, so you need to check that. Whereas some people, they go into the detail, then they want you to put a frame around it. So these are really important things to realize when we're presenting, we're speaking, or we're wanting to influence a person, so that we can, again, this is about rapport, you know, pace, 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 lead. How do we pace the way the person is thinking at this particular point in time? Do we need to pace them in the big picture? Do we need to pace them in the detail? Do we then need to lead them to the detail? Do we then need to lead them to the big picture, or can they do that for themselves? Now, there's a relationship between this particular metaprogram we're talking about today, which is the chunk size, and the one we're going to talk about next week, which is, again, is a real biggie, particularly in business. I'm going to give you some business case studies for this one next week, which is the relationship filter, or the relationship sort. Somebody who is more global in their thinking will tend to notice the similarities in things, because as we chunk up and we become more global, everything becomes the same. Somebody who's more detail oriented will tend to be more different, because when we get more and more detailed, things become more and more fractionated, things become more and more different. So there's a relationship between these two metaprograms, between global and sameness, which I'm going to talk about next week, and detail and difference, which I'm going to talk about more about next week too. And these two are real fundamentals around understanding how to influence somebody, and also how to communicate with somebody, and how to kind of like predict, if you like, the way that they're going to behave. So there we go. As I say, a big one this week with the chunk size operator. Oh, before I leave you, one final thing. So global and specific. One person's global isn't the same as another person's global. One person's specific isn't the same as another person's specific. So for instance, you could have two people who are both global to specific with their metaprograms, but this person's global was more detailed than this person's specific, if that makes sense. Yeah. So the way that the person moves around chunking of information or the hierarchy of ideas is completely unique to them. So you need to realize that as far as what does global and what does specific actually mean for this person. That's a extra distinction for you this evening. Have a fantastic holiday period over the next few days, and I'll be back with you next week for the relationship sort, big one. Have a great weekend.